Next up, we have Hannah Lutgen, who is the Floriculture and Landscape Junior Extension Agent from the University of Hawaii at Manoa. And she provides consultations, educational programs, and conducts applied research, and is based in Maui County. Her program focuses include integrated pest and disease management, soil and plant health, and variety trailing in support of the floriculture and landscape industry statewide. She has a Bachelor of Science degree in Sustainable Horticulture and extensive work background as a conservation specialist, cut flower, grower, florist, and landscape professional. Hannah, thank you.
Hello everyone, good afternoon. Hope you enjoyed your lunch. My name is Hannah, and today I'm really excited to talk to you about Protea. So today I just wanted to give you a brief update on the Protea pest and disease trials I'm working on, as well as the Protea field trials to maintain plant health. So first I just wanted to thank my awesome collaborators, USDA PBARC. A lot of you are in this room. So Dr. Lisa Keith, Roxana Myers, Lionel Sujiyama, Brian Bush, and the whole USDA PBARC team for all of your help. We finished this project, and basically we collected 83 plant samples of Leucospermum and Protea that had symptoms at the Maui Agricultural Research Center, which is in Kula, also called the Kula Ag Station. We also collected 57 plant samples from 10 Protea growers in Maui, and the USDA PBARC pathologists analyzed 140 Protea samples and identified approximately 32 fungal genera. So today I just wanted to give you a brief overview of the most prevalent fungi that we're seeing across the samples, which were Neophysiococcum, Alternaria, Cladosporium, Saccharata, Mycosphaeria, Epicoccum, Phomopsis, Colotrichium, Pestolotiopsis, and Nigrospora. So here I just want to give you a general overview of some of the symptoms that you can see based on the fungi, the fungal associations with the plant. So this is Leucospermum, and you can see Alternaria can sometimes cause these grayish tips. It's important to note that it's a facultative parasite, and it's not always a primary pathogen. We don't know whether it's secondary or it comes in later and can cause disease symptoms. And Alternaria can be a pathogen. It has a wide host range on many ornamentals, tropicals, and even edibles. So here are some more symptoms. You can see these leaf spots. Cladosporium can cause this kind of yellow scab on the leaves. Also, you can see this marginal leaf necrosis right here with the tan center. And you can also see these tiny little leaf spots with the black and brown border. Colotrichium can cause stem cankers, you can see on the branches. This could be potentially managed with something we'll talk about later by sanitation and pruning, so cutting this back to a healthy tissue. But you do have to be careful with Leucospermum when you're pruning, so you don't prune to a branch that doesn't have leaves beneath it, because that whole branch may die. So the pruning is very interesting with Leucospermum. Diaporthe or Phomopsis can cause these pinpoint red spots on the foliage. It can also cause leaf spots with concentric rings and a light brown papery leaf spots. In addition, Phomopsis can also cause these stem cankers, and I believe Phomopsis has a wide host range as well. I've seen Phomopsis and Phoma on native plants like koa. Epicoccum can cause these dark black-brown spots with red-pink halos, you can see right here. and then also browning of the leaf tips and stems. Mycosphaerella can cause small red spots that at first you may think, oh, does this plant need phosphorus? Is it phosphorus deficient? But it could be indicative of this fungal association with Mycosphaerella in either Leucospermum or Protea. Nigrospora can cause these, again, marginal leaf spots. It can cause pinpoint spots, and it can even cause these reddish colored leaves. Sometimes you see on Protea. I've noticed this with a lot of Protea growers in Upper Kula, and at first it may look nutritional, but it could be possibly linked to an association with Nigrospora in the plant. Sakurata is a fungus that has, it can cause, again, these leaf spots with a distinct black line between healthy and diseased. These are the plants growing in the field. And Neophysiococcum can cause discolored pith. So when you go to prune your Protea plants or your Leucospermum plants, make sure to look at the stem. If you see any discoloring in the vasculature, it could be indicative of a fungal issue or another pathogen issue. And this is good, honestly, a great habit to do when you're pruning any of your woody plants. Pestiloteuthis actually can affect eucalyptus, and it can cause these stem cankers and sometimes leaf spots and even root rot. It does have a wide host range. There's a lot of literature out there about this pathogen, I believe, affecting strawberry. And it can spread through diseased plant material and blackberry. Phomopsis, here again is another picture of the stem cankers that this can cause. And now I just wanted to transition, before I transition into the in vitro fungicide trials, just say thank you again to Lionel and the whole PBARC team for cataloging all the pictures. It's a lot of work, so thank you very much. Now I'm going to transition into the in vitro fungicide trials. So USDA PBARC tested Eagle, Spectro 90, Clearies, 666, and Trigo, Pageant, Tebuconazole, and Orchestra against different fungal pathogens in vitro, so in the lab. Whoops. So they tested this against Neophysiococcum, Alternaria, Colotrichium, Neopestiloteuthis, and Phomopsis. So again, some of the more prevalent fungi we're seeing associated with the Proteaceae. And according to the results, the highest efficacy was actually Eagle, Spectro, Clearies, Tebuconazole, Orchestra, and Pageant. So here you can see in these tables the top 3 to 4 most effective based on the different fungal isolates. So this information is very helpful. And basically, it's very important. This data suggests that we can use a rotation of up to 4 to 6 fungicides from different frac groups, which is really important to know in any fungicide program. You need to collect really good data, keep your records, and make sure that you are rotating and follow the label very thoroughly. You need to make sure that Eagle, in fact, has your plant listed on it, that it's labeled for ornamental use or horticultural nursery use, and make sure to follow that label and rotate so you do not build up a pesticide resistance, which can happen. Okay, now I'd like to transition. So USDA PBARC did the in vitro fungicide testing, and then here in Maui I tested fungicides on Protea plants and also Leucospermum, so 2 different varieties of UH Leucospermum, also known as pin cushions. So I used Pageant, Eagle, and Triathlon, which is actually a biofungicide made of Bacillus strain, so a beneficial bacteria. And basically the whole purpose of this was to evaluate the effects of these fungicides on plant health and disease severity to try to predict field efficacy. So basically I was trying to see, can any of these fungicides help the plants in the field? Can we use this? Can growers use it? Is it worth the money to buy this, apply it to reduce disease severity and improve plant health and yield? So based on the preliminary results, which are pretty interesting, the average number of leaf spots. So I looked at the leaf spots. We went over the different fungal leaf spots, and I actually counted all the leaves that had leaf spots. And across all varieties, triathlon had the highest average reduction in leaf spots, which is interesting. I just wanted to summarize that pathogenicity in Koch's postulates was not proven. USDA PBARC did a lot of work on identifying the fungi, but more research is needed to see, in fact, which of these fungal genera are considered primary pathogens or secondary pathogens, so they come in after the plant is weakened or stressed. Or some of these fungi can actually be saprophytic, so they're just there decaying plant material, organic matter in the soil. So we do need more research to see exactly what is causing the plant decline. And it is also highly unlikely that these, the fungi that I mentioned are in fact causing this plant mortality, which is good news. So we can, through our cultural and chemical methods, try to improve plant health and soil health to keep these plants healthy and happy. And future objectives, I would like to repeat the trials, so repeat the fungicide trials on different protea cultivars, because genetics could be a factor as well. And also we're still working on compiling all this information, and I hope to create an educational document that will be available for all growers and people to reference. Lastly, I just wanted to finish on protea pest management. Again, we don't know if these fungi are in fact causing the disease, but it's good. It could just be more association with the plants, which is something we could manage. So everyone knows the integrated pest management triangle. But first I would focus on cultural management, so disease pruning, which is going into the plant, pruning when they're young, because once leucospermum again grow too much and their branches below the branch, if it doesn't have any leaves, if you cut into that, if the leaves are up here and if you cut down here, let's say it cankers right here. If you cut below and there's no leaves, that whole branch could die back. So leucospermum are sensitive, so monitoring your plants early, doing some pruning, especially when you're harvesting your flowers, to actually increase airflow, so any crossed branches, pruning those when they're young, trying to help them. That even helps if you want longer stems for production. So disease pruning is a great cultural management practice we can use. Also, please make sure when you do prune your plants to disinfect and sanitize your pruners and all tools and equipment, because the fungal spores may get on your tools or they could even be on the air. So please make sure to practice good sanitation. And most importantly, maintaining plant health and soil nutrition. So mulching, adding mulch, compost, or amendments. So leucospermum and protea are sensitive to high phosphorus. Leucodendron is also in the protea plant family. That's more of a foliage. They are a little sensitive, I think the most sensitive to phosphorus. So if you do use fertilizers, I'd recommend a 24-6-18 or a 6-1-2. So something with the low phosphorus, the middle number. And then again, to summarize, chemical, you can use triathlon as a biofungicide. And you could apply that weekly, or if you're seeing your plants start to decline, let's say you're going into the rainy season, you're starting to notice more disease symptoms, you could apply this as a preventative measure, all of these fungicides, and do a rotation of 4 to 6 fungicides of different frac groups. And lastly, I just wanted to touch on the Protea field trials we're doing at the Kula Ag Station. So Terrace 3 and 5, thanks to Ms. Roxana Myers, actually had high levels of root knot nematodes, which could be contributing to poor plant health and decline. So we actually used freshly chipped cypress and ficus mulch, and we mulched heavily to encourage the soil food web. I'm now seeing worms. It's been over 2 years that we're seeing worms and bees and lots of more soil critters than before. We're collecting data. We did replant a few of the plants and monitoring mortality to see what's the difference before mulch and after mulch. So stay tuned. I'll provide that data in future seminars. And I also look forward to collecting more root samples and just seeing. We planted marigold. We intercropped a Nemagon marigold, which produces root exudates that is supposed to prevent or reduce root knots, so they don't like that. So we planted that, and that's growing well. The marigold is actually somewhat overtaking the Protea, so we're actually currently going in there and pruning it back. And then also in Terrace 3 and 4, thanks to Dr. Joanna Blasey, we are actually injecting silicon. This is our interesting injection system right here with a siphon. But we're injecting this redox into the drip irrigation. And we're collecting data. I'm looking forward to that. We've been doing that for about 6 months, almost every week. So anecdotally, we've noticed the plants are greener. Perhaps less disease, but again, we have to collect more data long term. On future projects, I hope to continue the Protea pest and disease trials, both the fungicide trials and then the field trials to improve soil and plant health and to see if that reduces disease. Oh. I also, this fall, plan to do a pin cushion cutting release. Getting caught up in my bracelet. Any questions? Lastly, I just wanted to thank everyone. Thank everyone. Again, PBARC, thank you so much for all your hard work. I know it was a lot of samples, so thank you. The Kula Ag Techs were instrumental in this. They helped me a lot. They're very knowledgeable. I couldn't do it without their help. Also, I'd like to thank Havla Mills, my technician, and Dr. Tessie, Joanna, James, Russell, and HFNA. Any questions? Any questions?
Thank you very much, Hannah. Okay, next up, we're going to have Dr. James Keach, who's the Assistant Extension Agent for Ornamental Crops and the Master Gardener Coordinator on the County of Kauai. His background is in plant breeding, and he has worked with a range of ornamental and edible crops. When he was based in Hilo, he led the breeding programs for taro and sweet potato improvement. Prior to moving back to Hawaii, he worked at a public garden in Singapore, conducting research and outreach on orchids and other flowers. His PhD work focused on screening species of impatiens for resistance to downy mildew and breeding this into commercial nursery varieties. In his current role, he hopes to expand the range of plants and new cultivars available to the ornamental community. Dr. Keach will be giving an update on Kauai County's ornamental updates.
Thank you all for making it through this. I know there's so much information, it can kind of be a lot to wash over us. And thank you, Glenn, for the great introduction. My slides are picture heavy, so if you're starting to kind of zone out, at least enjoy the pretty pictures and we'll go with that. But hopefully there's a little bit more to it. So I'm going to talk about a few different things that we kind of have going on over on Kauai. Get the bad stuff out of the way at the beginning, some new diseases and some updates on diseases that we've identified before. I'm going to talk very briefly about the import replacement trial. This is one that Hannah had been doing and distributed plants from. And so we had a small planting on Kauai, and some really great differences between what did well and what is just kind of struggling. I'll give some overview of the results from last year's germplasm survey that if you were here and at the field day, you would have participated in. And then I'll talk about inventorying some more of the germplasm we have at the station, and that's related to the plants outside. So I hope that you'll listen with that, but then also help me get together some preference data. So getting right into diseases, this was one that I just got brought to my attention a few weeks ago. It seems to be a really quick kind of wilt of Campanulaceae family plants. Folks might know that unfortunately a lot of our native species are in the Campanulaceae. You think of like cyanias, brigamias. We've seen it at all different elevations under nursery conditions, and then also some in the wild. There was a identification by Q that there is coletotrichum in it, but those don't look like coletotrichum symptoms to me. So we're trying to figure out what else might be going on within them. Right now, really preliminary sort of stuff, also looking at cultural management for it, but seems to happen really quickly, which makes me think might be something bacterial involved as well. Wilt can start within a day. You'll start to see a sunken lesion like you see over on the right. And then just within a few days, the whole plant will have wilted and kind of turned to goo. Not as huge an issue for our commercial Campanulaceae, but a big concern about some of the ornamental native species that are coming out of that family. So we're just starting to look into this, try to put together some research projects on it, and maybe some identification. And actually, Joanna, I'm going to bend your ear later about some silica as potentially something that might help with this. Another disease we were looking at was in gardenia. This was one where we didn't actually do identification on it, but we were looking at, again, some of the endangered native gardenia species. These are ones that had mostly been in cultivation. There were a handful in the wild that weren't seeming to have as severe symptoms, but we're noticing really quick defoliation and then just sort of stunted growth of the plant. Brian Bush was nice enough to come over to Kauai, happened to coincide with his granddaughter's birth, and so I think that was pretty good incentive. And he did some advice and looking at the plants, said might be Pythium related. We did find treating the plants with a systemic fungicide, in this case Heritage, did seem to improve plant growth and refoliation, but we're trying to look into other cultural conditions we can adapt that might help to get the plants going without having to do the regular treatments that unfortunately a lot of growers just say they can't keep up with. But we are pretty happy with what we've seen so far and are looking into, again, some different potting media and then different kind of growing conditions. And then I talked about this last year. This is one that we're still kind of working on. This is a new, what we think is an anthracnose on Costus. And it's on Costus, what used to be known as barbatus, now is Comosis variety bakeri. This is one that I had seen initially at one location, but we've now seen it at least 4 locations on the island, including one commercial location, which I noticed right after I saw it there. They pulled all their plants, thankfully. So we're hoping it's not spreading too much. I have seen plenty of plants that aren't affected, but more and more it seems to be creeping up. Sort of these characteristic sorts of rings on it. And so far, even though we've seen this on barbatus, we haven't seen it on other Costus unless they're in really close proximity to it. And then we'll only see a few kind of spots and doesn't seem to be kind of making a lot of inroads in with them. If you do start to see any of these diseases, I ask you to reach out to me so we can kind of start coordinating, coming up with some kind of areas of collaboration potentially. We are talking with Lisa Keith's lab and with Brian there. Maybe we can do some more work on it. But the big problem is that we don't always notice it at first on the flowers, but if you do pack the flowers, kind of keep in a box or anything like that, you get these really nasty kind of fading spots on the flowers like that. And so they just become unsaleable. So hoping we can come up with some ideas for treatment for that, and also hoping it doesn't spread to other Costus. I was trying to do a literature review of diseases in Costus, and I only found one other large disease outbreak in India in the 70s. So we know there's small incidental ones, but hoping this will not become some new theme. Bumping over to import replacements, these were plants that Hannah had provided us as seedlings several years ago. We unfortunately lost our tech who was maintaining the ornamental field, so it's been sort of high cylindrocaladium, high weed pressure. But I have gone through and fertilized them several times and also weeded around them a bit to try to keep up with them. These are, again, mostly some Myrtaceae and then also some Proteaceae. Doing all right. We see most of them been in the ground for a little less than 2 years at this point, I believe, and getting to be about 3 to 4 feet tall. However, by far the best performer has been the Grevilleas. These were put in the same time as the plants on the previous slide, but are 8 to 10 feet tall already. We're seeing flowering on moonlight. Even when it was in a 1-gallon pot, we saw flowering at our location. But we haven't seen any flowering on red hooks yet. Flowering seems to be pretty consistent. The only thing I'm a little worried about is even in 1-gallon pots, we've started to see seed pods forming and there's seeds inside. I haven't actually done germination studies to see if the seeds are viable, but I was looking and moonlight hasn't been tested on the Plant Pono website, but some of the other Grevilleas do have weedy potential. So we're really glad it's growing so well and flowering so well. At the same time, we want to kind of take another look at it and see if it could be a problematic plant. One thing we've also been talking about is whether, since it's so vigorous, it could be used as a rootstock for something else in the Proteaceae. It's kind of one of those long-term project goals, but hopefully we can start to kind of harness some of that vigor from it. Oh, and I should say all of this is at our research station in Wailua, which is about 530 feet above sea level, roughly 98 inches of rain a year, 78 to 88 degrees around year-round, and 260 acres, but all of this mostly concentrated in the ornamental fields. So last year, I put up some poster panels and had asked folks for preferences of what their favorite plants were. This was from our newer ornamental plot, and we were just trying to get an idea of what we should prioritize in terms of these huge plantings that we have. They're great legacy plantings, but with limited labor, we want to kind of know where to direct our funds. So the results, by far, the winner was this orange costus or Costus pictus. This was interesting in that it was one that the flowers aren't particularly showy, but has these really unusually patterned stems. And people were talking about growing it as a landscape plant, but also as a vertical interest in cut flower displays. After that, we see the bolded ones are the other ones that did well. Kiss of Death, I think the name as much as anything else sort of attracts people's attention. But these are large sort of club-like flowers that people really like the kind of dark color on. Curcumas, so these are same genus as Olena or turmeric. There's been a lot of breeding coming out of Thailand, and I'm starting to see plants on this island as well as on Kauai entering the trade for the commercial aspects. This was one that was called Banrai Red, even though they're white and pink. And we're seeing a few other ones along those lines. So I'm trying to do an increase of these and also maybe start looking at some collaboration with other turmeric researchers. Siam Rose was another one that did really well. This has been great for us, and the nice thing about it is it has a really heavy kind of yield and pretty consistent. You can see kind of the whole understory of the plant is just covered with flowers. Again, we don't have the labor to kind of maintain it regularly, but if you get it young enough, it does have that kind of rose-like appearance, and it'll last for quite a while. And then, interestingly, and I'll kind of talk about this in the next slide, we didn't see a lot of interest in the heliconias. The ones that there were interest in tended to be kind of the more yellow and orange shades rather than the kind of pinks, reds, and greens. But we did have this one that kind of was in that top one. And then, not really low elevation, but we do have an older kind of legacy planting of Proteas. Leucospermum, Henny's Torch, is by far our best producer at this point. I think our plant is 6 or 8 feet tall and has been doing really well despite high cylindrocaladium pressure. It does have some really nasty stuff on the leaves in terms of diseases, which I need to chat with Hannah and kind of figure out what's going on. But what's interesting is we also have Saxosum Red that didn't kind of make it up into these top ones. That one has almost no disease on any of the leaves, but has really poor elevation tolerance, and so it has that kind of sprawl that Russell was showing y'all. But we're hoping maybe we can kind of, if nothing else, make some crosses between them, or otherwise look into some other material that might be related. Least popular plants, I think it's important to kind of think, what won, but also, are there any things in common with things that didn't? One of the things I noticed is we tended to see kind of this palette of sort of magenta, pinks didn't seem to do as well. These were all the ones that had kind of 0 stickers by them at the end of it. And so I'm not, I don't want to make any huge assumptions, but it seems like maybe a palette that we're going to not focus on as much in the next few years as we kind of prioritize things. And it's, I guess good is kind of a relative word, but interesting that the heliconias didn't perform well, because this photo over on the right, I showed some folks yesterday when I was talking story with them. That used to be our heliconia field. We had one new laborer come in. We were trying to get some part-time labor to kind of shore things up. Someone told them to clean all the weeds out of the field, and they bushwhacked the whole thing. So yeah, it used to be Heliconia orthotricha to the horizon. So just a nice reminder to back up germplasm. I know don't have to tell the folks at PBARC that, but really sort of an issue in terms of, we talk about some of these older plants. I know Tessie was talking about it as well, with some of the anthuriums, like what can we do to make sure they're around if there's something that they can provide to future projects? And if not, how can we sort of maintain them in a sustainable way so that if something like this happens, we don't have to kind of scramble. I will say I didn't have a chance to put a picture up there, but yesterday I was out in the field kind of like combing it, hoping and hoping. And I did find one like 3-inch sprout, something that either got missed or had started resprouting. And we're going to kind of try to make lemonade out of the lemons with this and look at resprout data. I don't think it's going to be a way that we should manage weeds in heliconia, but at the very least, we can see kind of what the different growth habits are coming out of that. And these next few slides, I put this up because I know this is recorded and folks will see it online. Similar to kind of what we did last year, I have all the plants that I'm going to be talking about these next few slides cut and outside there. I'd love for you to go and take some of the little jewel stickers and put them next to your kind of 4 top favorite plants. Again, that helps us sort of allocate labor, helps us allocate resources, and also gives us an idea of what we should be kind of prioritizing in research. Yeah, and and the other thing I was going to say is the plants on the next few slides, we don't have a map for them anymore. Unfortunately, in the turnover of staff, without having a county administrator or a farm manager, we've seemed to have lost the maps to our older fields. So I identified most of these things by keying them down. However, I'm not a taxonomist again, and so if you know a better name for the things I'm going to be presenting, I'll take a page from our ex-president and take a Sharpie and to correct them on the ones out there. So just going to go through these briefly, talk about what we know and kind of what I've seen with these. We have 2 of the Calathea crotaliferas. We have yellow rattle and cream green. We haven't seen the bronze one. We might have had a plant of it at one point. But seem to be doing well. We do seem to see a little bit more damage on the yellow rattle in terms of the flowers, but both are pretty productive. Oh, and I should also say all of these plants, to my knowledge, have not been fertilized for the last 5 to 10 years. They're just kind of growing in an old field, and they sort of mow around them as the main control. So I'm amazed they're flowering at all, but I think it's a pretty good selective pressure that way. Another Calathea, this one I couldn't find a lot of information on it. It's a species that appears to be out of Peru. I don't have the actual species identity for it yet. One neat thing though is I thought it was all kind of the same cultivar, but we have 2 plantings of it. They appear to be equally mature, and we see a difference in kind of the size of, I guess, the flower head on it. One that seems to be a lot shorter and kind of petite, sort of like a delicate look, and then one that's larger, sort of like a mace. But really nice in terms of kind of that unusual green frothing and really long stems. I think the longest one I measured was 5 feet on it, so pretty nice in terms of longer cuts. Stromanthe lutea, officially known as orange beads, but all of our texts call it the Cheeto plant. This is one that does pretty well. We'd also previously mowed this over because the area it was growing was where we were putting in the eucalyptus trial, and seems to be resprouting pretty well. Really nice bracts, like a lot of these, not as much with the true flowers. And similarly, with the crepe ginger, I know the flowers don't last well, but we've had some folks kind of pointing out that the stems, where you see where the flowers were emerging and kind of the old peduncles and all of that are really nice as sort of an architectural element for flower arrangements. So when you look out there, you won't see any of them that are in flower because the flowers are really ephemeral, but you can look at the stems and at the leaves as potentially something for vertical interest. Costus, I didn't bring a sample of the barbatus because I didn't want to accidentally bring the disease over to this island. So if you really like this one, you can there is a picture of it out there. And then the kind of more common Costus woodsonii with some unfortunate common names is doing really well for us too. This is another one that's growing intermixed with the barbatus, but doesn't seem to be getting any of the symptoms so far. So we're hoping it'll kind of stay in that vein. This was kind of the one that took me the longest to figure out. Rhinealmia alpinia. The leaves really do look like an alpinia and has a really strong sort of gingery scent as when it's cut or when you're handling it. I was talking with Dr. Criley earlier, and he was saying he hadn't seen it in fruit as much. This is a relatively small plant, but tons of production. Only issue I'm seeing with it is it has decent size stems, but not as long as I'd kind of like them. Although all the stems out there were cut to fit in a suitcase, so don't take those as fully representative. Another heliconia, I think this is a psittacorum type. I know these are pretty common and can be somewhat weedy, but I haven't had a chance to kind of key it down to a cultivar yet. If there's interest in this, we can keep it going, but otherwise I'll probably pull this one out. Heliconia hybrid, Beehive by Marginata. This one is really great architecturally in that it's really contorted. I encourage you to take a look at it outside there. And then another kind of pendulous heliconia, I think this is La Ville, and just a little bit different than what we see with a rostrata, where it has kind of these longer bracts and slightly different growth habit. But again, still working on keying some of these down. And then Heliconia episcopalis crossed with Stanleyi. So you're getting kind of a little bit more spaced out than what you would get with the pure Stanleyi, and a little bit pointier as well. I really like, this one has been pretty productive for us. The biggest issue is that it's a huge plant. I would say at least 20 feet tall for some of them, so a little bit hard to harvest with that. But we have several plantings of it that seem to be doing well, so we're going to try to kind of see if we can kind of maybe bring it down a little bit. I don't know, try some shade trials, some other things. And then foliage. We've been trying to track down some of the older UH dracaenas that were released. Since we have so many plants scattered over the 260 acres, I keep hoping that we'll find the ones folks have been looking for. So far, we haven't, but I did find these kind of unusual ones growing there. Dr. Criley, I believe, said this was the Victoria form, you think? Yeah. So I found a single plant of this kind of stuck behind a sink somewhere. And so I'm trying to kind of revive it, maybe try to get it out. And then plant both in our shade house and several plantings of it outside of Waimanalo that seems to be doing pretty well for us as well. It's really neat with the Waimanalo, just looking at kind of the younger foliage versus the older, and you see the striping pattern really change in its width. So it could be really nice and sort of multi-purpose that way. And with that, I'm going to wrap up. I know we've kind of been playing catch up all day. Just wanted to point out, I always try to take photos when I'm traveling overseas so that we can get an idea of kind of what flower trends are going on in other countries. This is when I was in Singapore back in April. If you have questions or if there's plants you would like me to work on or eventually want pieces of when I get to propagating them, feel free to email me. And then I'm sure as many of y'all are used to, we do NIFA demographics reporting. And so if you're willing to fill out a quick survey for demographics, that would be great, but certainly not required. And I think that's it. Any question? Yeah, Orville.
Just a comment. So the moonlight, we also have moonlight at Lagoon, but right now it's just in a pot. We also observe flowering with that one and some pod. I'm not sure if it produces seed, but it produces those pods. But I get rid of it.
Yeah, well,
As soon as I see it.
and I'm glad to hear it's not just us, because I was a little concerned it was like just environmental. I did notice seeds, like in one that had dried out in the greenhouse. The ones in the field, I haven't been able to catch them at the right time, but I haven't tried germinating it, so I don't know if it's, viable or not. But I will certainly be keeping an eye on it. We don't need another invasive. Other questions? Eric.
I was just wondering, with your collection of exotics in California, maybe California, maybe in a little while, we will need more time for that, but is Kauai looking to distribute plant materials statewide through membership?
Yeah, so we get relatively often like folks reaching out to us asking for plants. And we've been not honoring it for one thing because we didn't have a greenhouse for a while and we have really bad cylindrocladium pressure in the soil. I'm hoping that now that we have a greenhouse and hopefully in a few weeks we'll have functioning irrigation, to start growing them up in pots and then clean them up a little bit and start distributing the ones that kind of do the best from this, if there's interest in them. And that's one of the reasons I kind of wanted to gauge this is if there's ones that folks really like, we'll kind of focus our resources. If not, we'll probably let them hang out in the field, but not going to kind of work on trying to clean them up or get them out. Other questions? If not, thank you all.
Sorry, okay, next.